Beijing's top policy office in Hong Kong has condemned 8 straight weekends of protests, saying violent activists must be punished. The Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office has also reiterated China's firm support for Chief Executive Carrie Lam. Speaking at a rare news conference, Yang Guang said the central government has been closely watching developments in the city. He noted the unrest has had a negative impact on Hong Kong's economy. He also stressed that the one country, two systems principle is the best way to govern Hong Kong, and that the central government will not change its stance on that. The policy body noted the series of violent protests since June 12th and praised the Hong Kong police force for enforcing the law. Mr. Yang expressed hope that Hong Kong can focus on economic development and livelihood issues instead. He added attempts by Western figures to stoke turbulence in Hong Kong and to contain China's development will fail. Now, for more on this, let's cross over to our correspondent in Beijing, Olivia Xiong. Olivia, what message is the central government sending to Hong Kong?
Well, in the 40-minute news conference, which I have to add is the first time that the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office is holding such a session with the media since the political unrest that has broken out in Hong Kong over the last 8 weeks, that already sending a clear signal of how authorities here in Beijing are viewing the situation there. And there have been a few key points that it has wanted to make at this session. The first being that Beijing supports the Hong Kong government under the leadership of Carrie Lam, even though there have been calls by protesters for her to step down. The second key point that authorities made today is that it supports and appreciates the Hong Kong police in maintaining social order. Thirdly, another key message is that Beijing has strongly condemned the violence that has been caused by protesters. It called what has happened over the last few weekends, the violence that has been seen as horrendous incidents, which it said has seriously damaged the rule of law, the economy and people's lives, public order, and the international image of Hong Kong. It also said that this has gone beyond the scope of peaceful protest, and it has infringed on the bottom line of the one country, two systems principle. Now, in condemning the violence by what it calls a small group of radical protesters, it cited the illegal protest over the most recent weekend in Yuan Long, where it said 20 people were injured. It did not make mention of the attack on protesters in that same area by a group of men who are believed to be from criminal gangs. But authorities also said that protesters had used hazardous liquids and powders and incited violence on Hong Kong police, as well as it said that, Hong Kongers, the protesters had even a bit of the finger of a policeman, and that Hong Kong police had discovered explosives and bombs that were being made in a warehouse for these demonstrations. And this is what the spokesperson had to say.
任何主张，无论自认为他的目标有多么崇高，都不能以违法的方式来进行，更不能诉诸暴力。暴力就是暴力，违法就是违法，其性质不会因为他标榜了什么目标而有所改变。中央政府坚定地支持香港警方、有关部门 和司法机构依法惩治暴力违法行为。
So the spokesperson said the central government had 3 key hopes. The first is for that Hong Kong people of all social backgrounds, they hope that they will oppose and boycott the violence that has been seen. Second hope is for the rule of law to be firmly safeguarded. And thirdly, authorities in Beijing hope that Hong Kong will be able to get out of this political conflict as soon as possible and focus on economic development. It did acknowledge that the Hong Kong government and the people needed to find a more effective way to address some of the concerns of the young people that we have seen on the streets, particularly in issues relating to housing and employment, as well as in other issues.
Ollie, all that being said, there seems to be no evidence to suggest that these protests in Hong Kong are ending anytime soon. Can we expect Beijing to intervene?
Well, the short answer to that is that there is no clear answer. One of the big questions is whether the People's Liberation Army will intervene. And today this question was posed once again to the spokesperson, but the official did not give a clear answer. He would only refer the media to a provision in the Basic Law. And he said that you can go and read up on that. But that provision relates to the Hong Kong government being able to call on Chinese army that are stationed on the mainland if it requires them to come and enforce and ensure and put in place public order, and there is that provision in the law for that, but no clear answer on whether that will happen. The authorities also did not answer other queries on, for example, some of the protesters' demands, one of them being whether or not there would be an independent inquiry into police actions, as protesters have claimed that there has been excessive use of force. Authorities sidestepped that question and would only say that the most important thing right now is for order to be restored in Hong Kong. But what Beijing is making very clear is that it does have some bottom lines. It has some red lines, one of them being in upholding the one country, two systems principle.
绝对不能允许任何危害国家主权安全的行为，绝对不能允许挑战中央权力和香港特别行政区基本法，绝对不能允许利用香港对内地进行渗透破坏。 这是3条红线，不可触碰。只有在一国的基础之上，才谈得上两制。所以，我们实践一国两制，一定要全面准确，不走形、不变形、不走样。
But with more protests being planned in Hong Kong and no signs of tensions easing, everyone is likely to be looking out for signs and looking into what may be happening next in the coming days and weeks, see what Beijing has to say moving forward.
Ollie, thank you very much for that. That was Olivia Song there in Beijing.
Let's get across to Jeremy Ko, who's in Hong Kong for us. Jeremy, tell us then, what's been the reaction to Beijing's comments today?
Well, the press conference in Beijing this afternoon has certainly been a very highly anticipated one, because this is the very first time that Beijing's office on Hong Kong and Macau is addressing the increasingly violent protests here in Hong Kong. And some protesters were even bracing for potential backlash from Beijing, but nothing of that sort happened. Instead, the official at the press conference merely reiterated Beijing's support for Hong Kong's embattled leader Carrie Lam, and also condemning the protest as well. So some people here are saying that the highly anticipated press conference turned out to be a damn squid at the end, and predictably reactions were split between the pro-democracy as well as the pro-Beijing camps. Let's take a listen.
They bring out 3 expectations. That is, I think, generally speaking, the 3 expectations are the wishes of most of the Hong Kong people, because nowadays we want all this violence to stop immediately. And, regardless of your stand, I think all this violence should not be continued, because it brings no benefit to any person.
I'm so worried. What happened in Beijing today, this afternoon, would actually help fan the fire of what's already been a tsunami of protest in Hong Kong. The way they say they would absolutely or resolutely rather support Carrie Lam and the police force, that they're trying to divide Hong Kong into 2 parts.
Now, the increasingly violent demonstrations here in Hong Kong and the chaotic scenes here as well has alarmed the business community here, and the American Chamber of Commerce has called for the government to address the protesters' grievances. But as of now, there are no signs that the Carrie Lam administration will give in to demands by protesters to, among other things, for her to step down and for an independent inquiry to be set up to investigate alleged police brutality against protesters. So what we're expecting right now is that these protests could go on for quite some time. Massive strikes as well as protests will be organized in the coming days, including calls to paralyze traffic here in Hong Kong. And as we've seen over the last 2 or 3 weeks, the protests here are increasingly violent, and just on Sunday, parts of Hong Kong resembled a battle zone as protesters as well as police battled it out with tear gas being fired on protesters in the heart of Hong Kong. So what we're seeing right now is Hong Kong could be caught in this cycle of violence, which could worsen at every turn.
All right, thanks for that update. Jeremy Coe speaking to us from the streets of Hong Kong.